Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.
Hello and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Apex Racing TV, and welcome back to the 2024 Radical Americas Championship. My name is Ron Mullins. Alongside me in the commentary booth tonight is my old buddy from Ray Esports, Charles Michelle, and in the virtual production hauler, we have Josh Wilkie. Now tonight, we head to Sebring for what I think is going to be a pretty exciting night of racing action all throughout the next hour and a half, actually hour 45, if you want to be a bit more precise with it. We've got long straightaways, which are really good for these cars, which are slipstream factories. They're really just beautiful cars, which is part of the reason why bump drafting is banned in this series, but we'll touch on that later. However, Sebring is still going to be a really challenging track that bumps, disrupting that weight balance and also taking away the downforce from that fairly big front splitter. Now, Charles, you were somewhat new to the Radical SR10s. We had a little bit of a Radical SR10 crash course right before this broadcast, so would you like to outline just some of the challenges, broadly speaking, here at the Sebring track?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically, you know, the hashtag respect the bumps, right? That's really what Sebring's famous for. So these cars, obviously, I've driven, as we talked about, I've driven the SR8 quite a bit. The SR10 I really haven't had a chance to work with very much, but the thing I like about the Radicals is the community involved in it's a really tight-knit community. They really love these cars. They worked hard to work with iRacing when they had issues with the SR10 when it came out to make the car better. And so I know this is going to end up being a really amazing race to watch. So yeah, it's all about the bumps and the curbs here. Obviously, with bump drafting being banned, that's going to make the draft down these straightaways a little more challenging, because you're going to have to just, either you're going to have to either back off or make a move. You're not going to be able to just kind of hang in there and stick in line. So it'll be an interesting little piece of strategy that you're going to have to work through.
Now, this is not the first broadcast we've had from these cars at this track. It's definitely not, when you count the official races that we've had on Friday every week here on Apex Racing TV, a series that I've been a part of ever since March of 2023. Good Lord, I'm getting old in my broadcasting career. But this track and car combination is definitely not new to plenty of these drivers. Looking through the drivers we have racing on track, there are plenty that we see week in and week out from the Radical Esports Cup, formerly known as Radical Racing Racing Challenge. We've got the likes of Franco Sanchez racing in here. We've got many other drivers that we see in the real world of Radicals as well. One driver, as a little bit of an IndyCar history buff, one driver that's always piqued my interest here in this series is a P7 runner currently in this practice session with about a minute and a half left to go, and that is Richie Hearn, who won the first ever, it was actually not just the first ever IndyCar race, but the first ever race, period, at the Las Vegas Motor Speedway. It was a Indy Racing League event there, the final race of 1996, which wasn't actually the end of the season because of very weird scheduling stuff they had with that season where they tried to end the season at the Indianapolis 500. It was a very weird time in IndyCar history, but he won that race, his only ever IndyCar win. However, he is a fixture of these Radical broadcasts, of this Radical America series, and he's currently doing quite well in this practice session. Right now, it's Ryan Odo, to be precise, at the front of the running order. We're following him as he was having a nice little battle towards the top end of the circuit, which is going to be a real trouble spot when it comes to the tires on these Radicals. We mentioned a lot in this series that tire management is quite important. I think it was at Monza last time out, we were hearing in the YouTube chat during that broadcast how the tires were being worn to about 70% by the end of these races that we have in this series, which doesn't seem like much. However, if you have a competitor that has just a little bit meat left on those tires, it can play a big role when it comes to deciding the results in these battles towards the end of these races. So that section between the hairpin of turn 7 all the way up until Tower Bend of turn 13, and he could really stretch it all the way up until Le Mans of turn 16 going onto this back straightaway. It is a section where the tires have no retrieval, no rest, and they are screaming in pain all the time. So that's going to be a big role that we have to play in this race. We're about to enter this qualifying session here, and I'll ask you this here real quick, Charles. We mentioned the bumps that'll play a big role in this. What do you think is going to be the most challenging corner for these drivers in this qualifying session?
I don't know if it's necessarily the most challenging, but you know, you're talking about well, I say this, as we saw, just as you were talking about tire management, you saw the 88 and the 15 coming through Sunset Bend and trying to manage the bumps and, you know, and manage your speed. And that little bit of tire difference, you saw the 15 car make it, you saw the 88 car kind of bounce it off the wall. That may end up being, you know, how the race ends. So you got to, as we're watching the 15 car trying to get himself righted. Don't know what qualifying scrutiny is, but if it's strict, he's going to get the furled black flag for that. So yeah, Sunset Bend's always one of those because it's one of those tricky corners, and it doesn't seem like it, but it's a very, very high speed corner. Seems like it should be built for these cars, but obviously you've got to manage your expectations going through there. You can take it in there really hard, but you really have to work because the bumps through Sunset will upset the car, and if you get the car off balance and, you know, maybe bounce it a little bit, you've basically lost the corner, and you've lost any momentum you've had going down to that front straight to the start finish line.
That is a incredibly important corner, a corner that we're going to see plenty of mistakes on in this race. Some decent overtaking opportunities for these drivers, that is for sure. The heavy braking zones, especially heading into the hairpin of turn 7, is going to be a section that we see, especially on the lap 1 of the 2 races we have later on tonight. That is going to be used by quite a lot of these drivers. We'll just have to wait and see where these drivers try and sneak a wheel down the inside. We saw last time out at the Monza race without the first chicane to kick this season off. Plenty of drivers racing quite aggressive, racing quite hard. They also put on one heck of a show, if I'm being brutally honest. That was awesome to watch. Last time out, that was quite a decent, quite a long ways ago. I'm trying to think now when it was. It was in February. I'll take a look at my schedule. It was February the 18th when that race happened at the Monza track. Without that first chicane, that was a big thing. Slipstream playing a huge role here, but now we're approaching kind of the midpoint in between some more tighter and twistier sections, tighter and twistier corners, I should say, here at this track. Sebring, it's a mix of both. You've got the long straightaways, but you've also got the tight, twistier sections that are going to test these driver skills. But as we get on later on into the season, next time out at Watkins Glen, running on the international layout with the boot, that is going to be a good race on April the 7th. So if you'd like to stay tuned, you can hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to never miss anything here on Apex. But Sebring is a fantastic track whenever the officials come here week in and week out, and I think this race will definitely be one that we have to keep our eyes on. Lap 1 is definitely going to be an exciting portion of this race. Just trying to get through clean at the track, which is fairly unforgiving with a decent amount of asphalt runoff. I mean, if you take an average around this track, there's a lot of asphalt runoff. However, at the top end of the circuit, which is used by IndyCar teams as actually street track testing, I believe, there's basically no asphalt runoff to speak of. So Charles, how challenging do you think lap 1 is going to be?
Yeah, you know, lap 1's always challenging because you've got cold tires. And this is this is for the most part a high-speed circuit. So a lot of these corners, there are a couple, you know, we saw going into turn 7, the hairpin, where you have to really be on the brakes. Here, this is a very fast entry. You try to bleed the speed off slowly as you can to get around sunset, to get that rotation, to get the car, keep the momentum up. But for the most part, a lot of these corners are medium to high speed corners, so it's going to be a very challenging start to the race because you're going to need all the downforce and all the grip you can muster to get through lap 1 safely.
Really just staying clean on lap 1. I think the old saying is you can win the race on lap 1, but you sure can lose it. We're in this qualifying session about halfway through now. It's Franco Sanchez at the front at a 1:55.6. That's a pretty good lap time from the driver from Peru. Meanwhile, it's we're following Matthew Howard, who is currently running in this qualifying session. Has not set a time, I believe, so we'll see him on the board here in just a few moments' time. I believe he is actually on his first lap here, so you can see that board populating with lap times. We haven't mentioned this so far on this broadcast. We do have two classes. We have the Pro category and the AM category. You can separate them with the red and the green tickers right there on the left-hand side of your screen with these SDK graphics. Currently the last driver in this qualifying session is McDougall, who must have had some kind of off trying to start his second lap because he saw him in the pits now to 2:02.8. So hopefully that's just a quick little banker lap from him. He can break into those sub 2-minute barriers. We're following the American in the number 176 car, currently running P17 in this qualifying session. A pretty decent field, a pretty stacked field as well. Many of the drivers, as I said, towards the start of this broadcast, many of the drivers that we see week in and week out from the Radical Esports Cup trying to stake their claim, and other drivers that we don't see in the official broadcast. However, we do see them here on Sunday night, so it's nice to see a mix of drivers from really both sides of the Radical community. You mentioned that the Radical community is so strong. It's nice to see how the community has regrown. It's nice to see great racing like this every Sunday. Well, not every Sunday, but sporadically, occasional Sundays between now and October 13th. I nearly slipped up there, but I had to mention that the season runs all year long here on Apex Racing TV.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like I said, this is one of those that, you know, you get these cars or these drivers with these cars, and they just become a very tight-knit community. They basically set the they help set the schedules for the official series. They help make changes to the cars when they see something that might need to be fixed. They're just really, it's just fun to see, and it's nice to have those communities involved in iRacing, and iRacing being receptive to the feedback that the community gives them.
Yeah, that was one big thing with these Radicals. It was season 2 of 2023 where these cars, I was describing to Charles how they drove like a 50s, actually no, I said a 30s F1 car, and it really is true. However, the iRacing team and the Radical community put their nose to the grindstone and turned this car into an absolute track weapon. You can set really quick lap times in these cars. They drive like a dream, and as my colleague JR Gregory on the official broadcast every Fridays says, every single week at the start of every single broadcast, driving this car will make you a better sim racer because it is awesome to drive. It really tests all sort of facets of skills for a driver trying to battle adverse conditions. Of course, this car does not have rain compatibility just yet. Fingers crossed we could see the Radicals have some rain. I think that would be an awesome race. A Radical race in the rain, I think that would be awesome from start to finish. Speaking of the official series, I'll try and pull up the schedule here real quick. We've got an awesome schedule coming up for the official Radical series here for Season 2 of 2023, and we're going to be kicking it off this upcoming week at Laguna Seca, 18 laps there, so that's going to be a good broadcast. So if you'd like to watch that here on Apex Racing TV, again, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, do everything that you need to do to never miss a thing here from Apex Racing TV. 2 minutes left to go in this qualifying session. Franco Sanchez still at the front. Now it's Odo jumping his way up to the front at a 154.9, so he's the first driver to break below that 1-minute 55 barrier. That's a pretty commanding lap time from him. We'll see if the likes of Sanchez or Solozano there in P3 can find any sort of pace, find a way to break the stronghold that Odo has in this session. Looking through the left-hand side of your screen, this series is always incredibly close, and you can see it put on full display right now. Solorzano that is currently P3 in this session at 155.505 in this qualifying session. You got to go back all the way to Salvador in a P7 to have drivers. That's how many drivers it is, separated by about a 10.5 there. So again, the Radicals always being incredibly close. Why did I say it actually is at 10.5? You can tell my brain is completely fried. It's a little bit late on the East Coast here, well, late by my standards. I used to have the sleeping schedule of an old man. It's 8:29 right now here on the East Coast, and my brain is a little bit fried. I've been out of high school for about a year now, so my math skills are not very sharp. However, the field is still just as close as it always is here in these Radicals.
Yeah, well, I'm so old that I can't remember when I was in high school. So, so I'm just for comparison, since we're talking about this. If you're new to this and if you're new to sim racing and just scrolling through YouTube, you're going to enjoy this. It's going to be fun. But this is if you're familiar with racing at all, I think the GT3 cars here at Sebring are just barely cutting inside the 2-minute mark. So maybe 158s, 159s. So these cars are actually faster than IMSA spec GT3s. So it just kind of shows you that these cars don't have the same horsepower, but the downforce absolutely is top notch.
Yeah, these cars are absolutely incredible, very fast, and we're going to get a full display of that in this first heat race that we have coming up for you right now. We're going to get the starting grid and try and run through it as quickly as we can before we take the start of this race. That's Ryan Odo taking the pole position for this race, a 1-minute 54.975 from him to grab the pole. Franco Sanchez will start alongside Solorzano there in P3, Zuccarelli in 4th, Mark Harris in 5th, Eric Harmon in P number 6, Timothy Salvador in P7, that's Matthew Howard in 8th, Richie Hearn in P number 9, that's Andres Inope in P number 10, Rylan Richard in 11th, Matthias Marias, I believe I may have butchered that pronunciation. I think I did, right? And that's Benelud, Jacqueline Abantes, and you can see the rest of the field now. The field populates quite quickly here, 23 cars taking the start. Hopefully only 21 actually set a lap time. It's Richard McDougal, man, that was a nice pronunciation. McDougal actually sounds a little bit funnier there. He is 21st, towards the tail end of this field in the number 176 car. I don't believe he got a chance to set a very clean and very representative lap, so we'll see what he does starting 21st. We're waiting for some of these drivers to pop their way onto the starting grid here. Standing starts from these Radical races don't have a rolling start, don't have any sort of time to warm up your tires before you try and attack turn 1, which is a little bit more than 90 degrees. I think I would call it 100 degrees there, but it's a very fast corner, very challenging. You have to rely on that mechanical grip considering how much that front splitter is bouncing up and down in the air. So I believe we have just a few more drivers waiting to line up on the grid here, riding on board with your pole sitter Odo. He is going to have a clean straight shot. He's going to be on the inside line heading into turn 1, just a few moments time. One thing that won't play a role here in this heat race that will be a role later on in tonight's broadcast is pit stops. We'll just have to wait and see. But now for this first heat race, the lights are out and the drivers are on their way into turn number 1. It's a pretty even keel start there from your pole sitter drivers, fanning out 3 and 4 wide. Some being and banging already at the front of the field, but it's going to be Odo leading the field into turn number 1. Meanwhile, we've got a challenge here, still racing quite hard. You can see the drivers hitting the bumps, trying to negotiate them the best they can. As Charles said at the start of this broadcast, you have to respect the bumps here at this track, but that was very hard racing at the start of this broadcast. The fact that Franco Sanchez and Ryan Odo were being and banging before they even got into turn number 1. These drivers racing quite hard. They don't have a whole lot of time in these races, only 15 minutes this first heat race is, so really it's crunch time for a lot of these drivers right as soon as those lights come out and the green flag comes out with it. So now we're seeing some drivers run wide coming through the hairpin this time by. I'm not sure who that was, going wide and going into the gravel trap, not the gravel trap, the asphalt runoff. Some driver going through the grass for a little bit of lawn mowing on lap 1. They'll not really like that on their tires at all. Some 3 wide action as they went through the hairpin at the start of this lap. So far so clean. Knowing my luck, I probably just jinxed it.
Yeah, it was a good start overall. I did see a couple of slow ones, slow drivers off the line, and as you said, had that nice runoff down there in turn 7. One went, I think, on the asphalt. One actually just went through the grass, but it's an off track and a little bit of a slowdown that you have to work off coming back on. But it's a good, safe place to try and avoid any 3 wide into the hairpin, because that just generally doesn't work. As we see another car flying off in the background there. Couldn't he see who that was?
I'm not sure who that was. We may have to take a look at a replay to see what in the world happened. I see some drivers doing some lawn mowing action coming out of Le Mans this time by. They're going to start the second lap of this race. We have 15 minutes here on the clock. At this point now, it's only 13 left to go. We're following an Ope trying to go for a move around the outside to break his way into the top 5. Won't be able to get it done there. These drivers really, they get as close as you possibly can to that outside tire barrier without actually hitting. We're following Richie Hearn now, trying to get the move done on an Ope. He sensed that an Ope was feeling a little bit racy and felt too racy and may have overcooked his tires there. So Richie Hearn trying to get the move done heading into turn number 1, but doesn't work for the driver now running in P7. This is Matthew Howard just outside the top 10 right now, currently running in P11. Has a bit of a decent gap between himself and the P10 runner right now, so the field already breaking up into some pelotons. I think I saw a big puff of smoke there from a driver going off coming through turn 3 this time by. I think right as I said that we had a fairly clean start to the race, we already see some drivers going off. Not sure if we can load up some replays of that Chamazo. You can see some cones down already. I think we have a lot of replays to touch on from some of the chaos that we saw on lap 1. This is the first one here, and this is heading in to the hairpin. This is Solorzano, who was the one, I believe, that went straight on into the hairpin here. We're following him, outbroke himself, hit that lockup. These cars are so easy to lock up in those heavy braking zones. You basically have to hit that brake pedal as if there's an egg underneath it, so the catching out there is Solorzano. Tough break for him, and this was a driver right behind him. This was Diego Zuccarelli, the Canadian. Following him, was running in P4, outbroke himself a little bit. I think it was a little bit of target fixation there as he saw the car right in front of him go off. He just ran wide in sympathy with him, went for a little bit of a trip through the grass, had to serve a slowdown, and we're looking at some of the chaos that happened right behind him. That hairpin run on that first lap was absolutely chaotic. This is Rylan Richard, who had a little bit of a checkup there, made contact, being and banging some drivers attempting a bump and run coming through the hairpin at the very start of this race. Some drivers breaking at the elbows, and we have one more replay here, and this was a driver that was going off. We're riding on board with Mateus Marias in the number 174 car, and that was definitely a big bump that he had from one of his competitors, and bang into that concrete barrier. That has a hard impact, and that'll take him out of this race. There's another angle of it, and who is that right behind him? I'll try and look at the number there. 26. That is, that is the 26 car, so I believe that's Zuccarelli that made contact. Not an ideal start for the Canadian in the slightest, not an ideal start for the Brazilian, with a completely wrecked front end of that Radical SR10. Thankfully, in this series, we do have a fast repair for these drivers to negotiate. However, not a good start for those drivers involved in incidents at the very start of tonight.
No, not really. That's not the way you want to get your race started. But luckily, we get the fast repair. You got time to make up a position, especially when others may be making mistakes. But not the way you want to approach into Indianapolis and Le Mans there at high speed and then straight into the barrier.
That is a very hard impact as well. I think thankfully these drivers, as we see a spin coming through, that's Cunningham, turn number 10. This time by, I'm not sure who that was. I was spinning like a top. I think it was a Nope that went for a spin. So I think there might have been a little bit of contact there. Perhaps maybe he just overcooked it, or maybe he beached it on that curb. These curbs are fairly high. That's someone upside down. What in the hell happened there? Was that just a glimmer in my eye? Did I have some kind of weird fever dream of some sort?
No, you absolutely saw that correct. I think that was a Brontes that looked like he was upside down, and maybe we'll get a replay here as we're taking out. Yep, there. Oh no. Ooh.
Oh no, it's Odo getting caught out in that. The leader of this race and the pole sitter gets caught up in that Shimazal, a completely wrecked front end. And you gotta feel so bad for the driver who had bad luck last time out at Monza, continues to have some bad luck. We're taking a look at another replay here, and there was basically nothing that he can do here. It's just, that's.
I was gonna say that was I was gonna say that was not a great rejoin, but it looked like that car may have had suspension damage. It just, the way he was driving through the grass, it was just weaving in both directions. And I think he just lost control of it, and it came back across the track.
Oh, that is so unfortunate there. If that was a conscious attempt at a rejoin, and a terrible attempt at a rejoin at that, and that's what happened, that is asinine, if I'm being brutally honest. We're taking a look at another replay. It was actually Brian Johnson in the number 50 car that went off the track here. This was a spin, and I think, we're seeing it.
I'm gonna say that car may have had some previous damage, and he was just trying to limp it back around. But then, there's not as much grip in the grass. There's more than there used to be, but it's still not great. It's not like driving on concrete, and just bad luck. It's just, and you hate to get a guy that's up in the front battling for a race win just get caught up in that. It happens a lot, but it's still sad to see.
And what's unfortunate about this as well, I mentioned throughout this broadcast already, and I'll mention it again, we do have another race to contend with later on this evening. It's a lot longer, so Ryan Odo will have a chance to claw his way through the field, try and cut through it like a hot knife through butter. He certainly has the pace to do it, however, right now, currently P19 in this race. That's not ideal. It's given the lead to Franco Sanchez in the number 88 car. He has a fairly commanding lead at this middle stage of the race, 7 minutes and 45 seconds in to this 15-minute affair here. This Mark Harris currently running in a P7, acting as a little bit of meat in this sandwich right outside of the top 5 now. We'll see. Will he try and go for a move here, heading into 1 to break into P6? He's going side by side, going into turn number 1, and it's going to be very close between these two drivers. No margin for error whatsoever going through that corner, but they go through there pretty cleanly. This Diego Zuccarelli in the number 26 car has not had a good start by his standards in any way, shape, or form. However, he is running in a pretty decent position right now, running in P8, which I believe would give him the pole for this second heat race that we have coming up later on tonight. So right now, running in P8 is not the worst position in the world. Currently, we have 21 cars left on the lead lap, a fairly spread out field with the top 20 separated by about 52 seconds with the chaos that we saw earlier on in this race. Zuccarelli, I have a good feeling about him. He has a fairly fast race car. I mean, he qualified up towards the front, so he definitely is a very fast driver. We'll see if he contend with his fellow Canadians and try and make up some positions here.
Yeah, Zuccarelli, just looking at his lap times, is making up ground on the cars in front, and so as the great Murray Walker of F1 broadcasting fame used to say, it's one thing to catch them, it's another one to pass them. So he's got a little bit of work cut out for him. The track is good enough to do a lot of good side by side racing, but once you get offline and you get a little uncomfortable, not sure where the bumps are, what you're used to dealing with. Makes it a little more treacherous.
Looking through the YouTube chat now, and it's actually CJMSA. I probably didn't read off those letters correctly. However, they say that was the first bump of the season. I believe you may be correct there. These radicals are somewhat light. I mean, they are fairly quick race cars, as you mentioned before you grab the start, Charles. These drivers are setting faster lap times than you'd see in GT3 cars, as that was a big bump there. That was Harmon, I believe, running wide, coming through the last corner, and had a pretty big knock against that tire barrier. So I think right now these drivers getting their elbows out, pushing these Radical SR10s as hard as they can. We have about 5 minutes left to go here, so I think we're teetering around. I'm trying to do the quick maths in my head. I believe about 3 laps to go here. So I think right now Harman trying to find any sort of way to move into the podium spots. This is a fantastic result from Hearn, who did not have the best race in the world last time out at Monza. However, currently in this race, he's running quite well, running on that podium, but he will have any sort of challenge from Harman. But if these two start to battle hard, we could see Richard right behind in P5 get involved in that fight about 7/10, now about 8/10 of a second. Separating them, we've got some shuffling farther in the back. I believe Jacqueline may have had some kind of mistake coming through the hairpin. We're seeing that was Harman actually breaking out of the draft as they went through the flat out section between the hairpin of turn 7 into Cunningham of 10 when they finally have to slam on the brakes and get these SR10s woed up. So this is going to be a heads-up fight between these two drivers. Currently, it's a 2-car fight. I wouldn't be too shocked in the slightest if it becomes a 3-car fight between now and the checkered flag. However, this is going to be a really close fight between all 3 of these drivers, as we're seeing Odo claw his way through the field, going for a bold move down the inside of the hairpin, gets it done to move into P16. But Charles, who do you think is going to hold off in that fight for that last podium spot?
Well, here's the thing: is we've seen it, and a lot of my broadcasting is with single make races, and especially with cars that are really good in the draft. And once you start battling side by side, it just invites more and more cars in to that battle. So it's really too early to tell. It's, obviously Hearn has got quite a bit of racing experience that some of these guys may not have. But this is sim racing, so some of that applies and some of it doesn't. And so it's just a matter of who can make the right move at the right time, and then hopefully that we don't have any more incidents with lap traffic.
Speaking of pulling off the right move at the right time, Ryland Richard moves into P4, so he was battling with Harman and it's allowed Hearn to pull away now about 8/10 of a second, separating them. This is Joel Jacqueline that we're riding on board with in this fight outside the top 10. A big lock up and big contact as they come out of turn number 3 there. That was Joe Jacqueline that we were riding on board with, and I believe that was a Nope that he hit there. So I think a Nope may have just lost it, got sideways on that curb on the outside of the turn, and led to that disastrous series of events for them. This is Howard, who gets a job done to move into P9. That was a move done on Solorzano, heading into corner number 7 there. As I'm going, oh, this is a beautifully timed notification. I'm getting a notification now saying that I need to do this broadcast. We've been on the air for about half an hour now. Thank you, phone. I really appreciate the very late notification. That's wonderful. Matthew Howard running in P9. The decent race from him, all things considered, in the number 72 car. Quite hectic, which could explain why plenty of these drivers have cut through the field quite well. Timothy Salvador, currently running in P2, is up 5 spots from where he started. Richie Hearn up 6, and that's Ryland Richard up 7 right now. So a lot of drivers cutting through quite nicely. Currently, the biggest position gainer is Brendan Wright, running in P14, up 8 spots from where he started this race, mainly due to the likes of Ryan Odo dropping down 15 from where he started from the pole, drop back like a rock. Solorzano, with that mistake he made at the very start of this race, down 7 spots from where he started. It's feast or famine with these drivers, some having very good races, others having very bad ones. And looking through the live timing screen, I must applaud the fact that we have 2 rookies racing in this field, Richard McDougall and Brian Johnson, who's involved in that Chamazel with Odos. We're seeing John Benelid try and go for a move down the inside. He's actually on the outside, my apologies. He just got a move put on him by, I believe that's Harris that he's battling with here. So this is hard stuff between these two, and Benelid gets the job done in the number 8 car to move into P6. Zuccarelli is still the tail car of this fight, about a half a second back. We could see this turn into a 3-car fight between now and the checkered flag, which is coming at in about a lap's time. We are on the last lap of the race. It looks like Sanchez is going to pull away for a commanding win to take the checkered flag in this first heat race. Meanwhile, Benelid and Harris still going side by side, just about cleared him heading into the hairpin there. They're just barely those pixels between them being side by side and not being side by side. This is Ryland Richard, who's clawed his way up into that podium spot. That is quite impressive from him. So I was thinking that Richie Hearn was seeing the fight between Richard and Harman and was happy that he was going to start to pull away, but Rylan Richard moves into the podium spot after getting a move done here. That was Richie Hearn getting all kinds of sideways, got all kinds of screwed up, coming out of the hairpin. It's a very tricky corner, really hard to get the power down in these Radical SR10s, which leads to Rylan Richard in the number 69 car. Nice, moving into that final podium position. So unless we have a challenge here from Hearn between now and the end coming up in 1 corner's time, you can see the snaking maneuvers going down this back straightaway, going down the Ullman straightaway, this time by Franco Sanchez is on his way to a commanding win. Meanwhile, Richie Hearn not able to find a way to get past Richard, heading into the final corner. Sunset Bend they are now, and Hearn will have to consolidate any sort of run he can, exiting that final turn. Franco Sanchez wins, and it's going to be Salvador finishing in P2, and rounding out your podium is going to be Rylan Richard. The gap between himself and Richie Hearn there right at the finish was less than 0.2 of a second. It's a very hard fought fight there. Meanwhile, it's going to be Hearn there in P4, Harmon in 5th, Benelid in 6th, Harrison 7th, Zuccarelli in 8th, Howard in 9th, and Solorzano rounding out your top 10 of a very hard fought and hectic, I think we would have to say a chaotic race as well. Heat 1 from this evening, is that a sign of things to come in the second heat race?
Yeah, probably so. Oh, well, you say that, but sometimes when you get those longer races, the drivers are a little more cautious at the beginning. They don't try and take as many chances. It's a little more calculated, so we'll see if that's how it goes. But great job by Richard. Just took advantage of a very small mistake by Hearn, but it was enough to get the good run out of the hairpin, and was able to consolidate that pass before they got into Cunningham.
We're going to take a look at the replay of this fight between Rylan Richard and Richie Hearn. One's an IndyCar race winner. The other is a driver that was a standout star throughout the Monza broadcast last time out about a month ago. And that was a very hard-fought fight between the two of them at decides the podium. Rylan Richard grabbing that P3 spot. A quite impressive race from all these drivers. I said feast or famine, and it really is the case with these drivers. Many making mistakes. Certainly Ryan Odo, you have to feel commiserations for him. He was pretty much on track to a commanding race win, but unfortunately for him, he finishes 48 seconds back of the lead in P15. So he is going to be a driver that we have to keep our eyes on in the second heat race. Quite a lot of storylines that we have to follow coming into this race. But first, before that, as I believe we have just a few more cars. I believe actually have all the cars taking the checkered flag of this first heat race. I believe they have. So regardless, we are going to move into a quick little warm-up session here to have a quick little break and just talk about not only the race that we just saw, but the race that we have in store for us here tonight. There's one more bruised Radical SR10 waiting to go around the final corner, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is actually the driver that was the epicenter of the chaos. This is Brian Johnson clawing his way. He'll finish this race in last after having to tow back to the pits. Actually, I believe he crashed in this lap as well, and will be pulling into the pits instead of taking the checkered flag 4 laps down in P23. You got to applaud the rookie for showing up to the series. Unfortunate that he was involved in that incident that didn't look like it was intentional in any way, shape, or form. Just an unfortunate accident between the driver that looked like he was going to take a commanding win and one of the drivers, one of the back markers of this series. He has now taken the checkered flag, albeit in the pits, so that first heat race is now done, out of the way, and we can kind of look at the aftershock of that first heat race, so to speak, and also look forward to what we're going to see in Heat 2. Longer race, so I don't think we're going to see drivers pulling off just as the aggressive moves that we saw in that first heat race. However, I think we're in store for quite a hectic one. So in terms of attrition, Charles, what do you think we're going to see from this heat race coming up?
Well, I will say this. It's Odo working his way through the field. He's going to start mid-pack and just try and work his way up. Obviously, it was a good battle between him and Sanchez early in that race before the unfortunate incident that he had. So if he can get back up there, if Sanchez has somebody up there that can maybe challenge him for a couple of laps, keep him in check, Odo can work his way up and make that a very interesting race at the end. So he's got plenty of time to do it. He just had to be patient, make good, clean passes. Obviously, I think that the Richard Hearn and the other driver, and I can't remember his name now, So, that battle is they're going to start next to each other, I believe, based on the finishing order. Is that right? So that should make it for a very interesting battle from start to finish.
Well, they will be starting next to each other. However, it will be a little bit flipped here in this race. We do have, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I'll fact check myself here, but it is reverse top 8 of the starting grid. The finishing order from that first heat race decides the grid, kind of, for this the second heat race here. 45 minutes long, so a lot more time for these drivers to settle into a groove. Pit stops as well, that wasn't an issue in the slight as well. We did see some drivers come into the pits, but not of their own volition there. So we will see that here in this second heat race coming up. 45 minutes long. They're kind of forced to come into the pits here. The fuel burn will not be as severe as it was at Monza last time out, but we did see some different fuel strategies there. Some drivers short filling, trying to get their legs up when it came to just being in front of their competitors. Track position is very key in these Radical SR10s, which don't have, well, they punch a big hole going down those long straightaways. However, the adverse is true into the corners, a little bit of dirty air for them to negotiate. So it's going to be a big role and a big factor in the second heat race that we have coming up. I think what we may do is we may go through the finishing order from that first heat race there. 15 minutes in length. It was quite chaotic from start to finish, but if I'm being brutally honest, it was quite awesome to watch as well. And it was Ryan, actually no, these are the championship standings, my apologies. It's Ryan Odo at the front of that right now after a good race last time out at Monza. So now I think we'll go into the race results here. It's Franco Sanchez, the Peru driver, grabbing the checkered flag, 4.2 seconds ahead of Timothy Salvador in P2. Ryland Richard will be in P3. That's Richie Hearn in 4th, Eric Harmon in 5th, John Bentley in 6th, Mark Harris in 7th, Diego Zuccarelli in P8, Matthew Howard in P number 9, and that's Manuel Solorzano rounding out your top 10 and being the top running of the drivers in the AM category. So quite a decent race from the driver from Colombia, if I'm not mistaken, trying to test my flag knowledge there. I believe that is the flag from Colombia. My producer Josh giving me the A firm on that. I'm surprised I can actually get the flags correctly. I only have one monitor and it's not the biggest in the world, so thankfully it wasn't too pixelated for me to not discern what kind of flag that was. I had one kind of infamous flag gaffe in my very first month of broadcasting here at Apex, and I confused the Argentinian flag for the Guatemalan flag, which was actually quite embarrassing because one of my closest friends that I've had for many, many moons is actually from Guatemala, so that was not a very ideal moment from me. We're still in this warm-up session. I think we'll get focused and talk about the second heat race, a bit longer in nature. As I mentioned, the fuel strategy and pit stops that these drivers will have to negotiate. Charles, if you were one of these drivers, would you try and short fill and try and pull off a nice move there to have to save gas in the later stages of this race, or would you take it a bit more conservative in your approach with the race strategy?
I probably would not short fill. I would probably just go with what I've been working on, is just whatever max fuel is. Now I may look at maybe doing an undercut. It just depends on where I am in relationship to the rest of the cars. Like these cars draft really well, and if you can get some clean track around and you can set some good lap times, then that may work out in your favor. I will say this, I'll go back and kind of amend what I said earlier. Since we do have an eight position invert for this next race, that's going to make it much better for Odo versus Sanchez, because he doesn't have quite the gap. And Sanchez is going to have traffic in front of him. So that's going to be a very interesting dynamic that we're going to get to see in amongst this race to see.
And going through the starting grid for the second heat race, I apologize, I confused this with another series. It's Franco Sanchez grabbing the pole for this race. Timothy Salvador in P2, Ryland Richard in 3rd, Richie Hearn in P4, Eric Harmon in 5th, John Bentley in 6th, Mark Harris in 7th, Diego Zuccarelli rounding out your top 8. That's going to be Matt Howard and Manuel Solorzano rounding out your top 10. I apologize, I confused that with another series I do here on Apex Racing TV when you have a field invert in between the two races, but regardless, regardless. The lights are already out and the drivers are on their way into turn number 1. We'll see Franco Sanchez. Is he going to feel quite as racy as he did with Odo at the start of that sprint race? No, he is actually quite unchallenged, undisturbed at the front of this field. Meanwhile, Ryland Richard is going side by side. He's on the inside line right behind there. We got a spinner farther in the back. I believe that's Richie Hearn going for a spin at the very early parts of this race. I think that's him going for a spin. I'll take a look at my live timing screen to fact check myself. Actually, no, that's Matthias Marias there at the back of the field after going for a spin down 7 positions from where he started. Not the best start in the world for the Brazilian, if you're being honest, but it's a great start for another South American, the Peru native of Franco Sanchez. He is leading this field. Heading into the hairpin the first time by, this was a source of carnage during that first heat race, during that sprint race. Will it be one here today as well? This is Ryan Odo, who's cut through the field like a hot knife through butter. He is now running in P11, up 4 spots from where he started. One of the biggest position gainers already in this race. Actually, Bruno Brantes is currently running in P13, up 9 from where he started. That's a fantastic start from the Brazilian. Feast or famine yet again. One driver making a mistake very early on. Again, as I did in that sprint race, I probably just jinxed myself, and we're going to see 5 drivers spear off the road in just a few moments' time. However, it's a good start for Franco Sanchez, but right now he is feeling a challenge from Ryland Richard as they go into the Le Mans section in just a few moments' time, entering turn 15 now.
Yeah, it's a good battle up front. This is exactly what Odo needs as he's working his way up to the field. He needs a little pressure on Sanchez up front. And so that's going to make that, that's really close there. Those lines coming through Le Mans, that was really tight, but just a good pass. Now that he's down on the inside, is he got to slow down? No, looks like he's still up speed. So he's just going to have to keep working up. And as long as those guys up front continue to battle, gives him a chance to work his way through the field and make that a more intense battle up front. So we'll just kind of keep his progress. It was a 53 car, just caught it. Great catch by the 53 there. Krasick, yeah, it's a great catch. Just got the car. There's a bump on the inside of Sunset there. And it looked like it caught him out a little bit, but he was able to catch it. And with no, didn't look like he hit anybody or hit the wall, so he can continue on and see if he can make up for some of that time he lost.
And now it's Ryland Richard moving into the lead of the race with a fairly textbook move heading into the turn 3, 4, and 5 section, but it's still not over yet. Now Franco Sanchez is trying to challenge him on the outside. It's going to be a battle of the last late breakers heading into the hairpin. Richard is still going to have that inside line and clears him well before they get into the corners. That's a good move there from Ryland Richard to hold off that challenge. Sanchez still in P2. Timothy Salvador is trying to find any sort of way to break up that fight, running in that last podium spot now, as Richie Hearn running at the top 5 currently in this race. Right now, the top 6 currently. Actually, you could really extend it to Zuccarelli and P7. Basically, the top 7, or you can cover them all with a blanket separated by about 2 seconds. This is a Brantes who is still cut through the field quite nicely, now running in P13 in the number 3 car. Was our camera car with that massive save that Krasick had in the early stages of this race as it went around Sunset Bend last time by at the very opening lap. That was a great save. I was ready to read out a SimRacing obituary after seeing how sideways he went in these Radical SR10s. They are very well, they're good to drive, but they are also, they can bite. These Radical SR10s can absolutely bite you if you get it a little bit wrong. And Krasick acting as a little bit of a lion tamer. Speaking of lion tamer, right now these two lions are fighting for the lead still. Ryland Richard still holding off a challenge from Franco Sanchez as they start this 3rd lap of the race. However, Sanchez is going to have a massive run going down the start-finish straightaway side by side heading into 1. Benelid sets the fastest lap of the race. Now it's Odo setting the fastest lap as you see Sanchez trying to get the move done around the outside. They're still going to be side by side. Actually, no, I believe Sanchez clears them before they get into 3. So finally, Sanchez, after a few broken opportunities trying to retake the lead, finally gets a job done on Richard as extending that gap to about 0.4 of a second now.
Yeah, it's a good race up here. It's just really tight all the way down. It looks like Odo has kind of tightened that gap up. So now you've got basically a 10, 11, 12, 13, just a train of 12 or 13 cars, just really going to be working, racing each other hard as we see a move there on the inside. Hearn trying to make up that position against Oh no! And just loosened out.
Anope. Oh no! Anope clips him.
Just on the comeback.
That was Anope going for an absolute send of a lifetime heading into turn 10. A very challenging corner. In the official races in the past, I've seen plenty of drivers come to blows coming through that challenging turn 10, and especially considering so they have Collier right after that, which is another challenging turn.
Harmon?
That's another driver going, so that's Eric Harmon. Very much going slow. I wonder, did he have some kind of slowdown? Did he have some sort of spin? That's not a good series of events for the driver, the number 617 car. I think we're going to take a look at a replay to see Anope and his absolute dive heading into the turn. I think it was Harmon that actually assisted him. You can see him in the car right in the back of shot there, so I think he was involved in that just a little bit, which might have been the reason why he dropped back like a rock through the running order, but Anope goes for a send. There were about 17 different times in that very short series of events where himself and Hearn looked like they were going to come to blows, but in all that chaos going on, Ryan Odo has slipped into the top 10. He's currently running P7, has Zuccarelli, Howard, and Salvador right in front of him. He's at the tail end of that field. So we're taking a look at another replay. This is Harmon going incredibly slow. This is sketchy to have a car that slowly on the inside of Collier Bend, which is a very tricky turn regardless of what car you're running in. I was driving the GTPs around this track in the rain earlier on in this week, and let me tell you, I crashed through there quite often because that's a very challenging corner even in the dry. So Harmon had some sort of adverse situation. I think it was definitely a slowdown. Maybe it might have been because of the Shamazel. Oh, it was contact. I thought it was just a send from Anope. No, it was actually just Anope getting help there from Eric Harmon and stuck on the inside. Was there a slowdown to be served there? He was very slow even as he rejoined the racing surface. That was unfortunate. It was a stack up there. I apologize to Anope because I thought he was just going for a really bold send at the start of this race. No, he had a massive amount of help there. Sadly for him, he is running in P22. Currently not in last as Brian Johnson currently running at the tail end of this field. Lap traffic may play a big role in this race as well, considering we're tracking about 1 minute 55 lap times, and currently Brian Johnson is 1 minute 37 seconds back of Sanchez at the lead of this race. Currently 9/10 of a second separating himself as it extends now to over a second separating himself and Ryland Richard at the front of this field. Currently a little bit of a different race than we saw in the heat race. Less hot tempers, less of these drivers going for really bold moves. However, these drivers still racing quite as hard and still a lot more storylines to follow between now and the end.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and you know what? I'm going to throw this out there. I think that Harmon, after just completely missing the breaking point there and getting into the back of Anope, I think he basically just pulled over and let all those guys go back by and just said, you know what? I messed up. I'm going to be a good sport about it. I'm going to let them have the positions back. Obviously, Anope coming in and pitting, obviously concedes that position, but he let, Hearn and all the rest of the guys that were involved in that incident. He just basically said, you know what? I screwed up. Y'all go on back by. I'll come back and I'll see if I can, get a better pass on you the next time we come around.
And we're taking a look at another replay of the Shamazel with Anope as they head into to turn number 10 that time by. That was unfortunate. It took out some pretty fast race cars too, so sadly all those drivers on the back foot. It's still not over yet. Hearn is still about 17.5 seconds back of the lead, so really the driver that got spun out was the most unfortunate getting clipped in that whole accident and coming through turn 10. He is still in a somewhat decent spot. Hopefully there isn't any damage on that Radical SR10 of his. However, he does have the opportunity, if he wants to take that fast repair when that one and only pit stop comes up in this race. We're taking a look at the fastest laps of this race now, and it's Benelid at a 1 minute 55.755. That is pretty much on pace with his time in qualifying. One thing as well with these Radical SR10s that we mentioned, whether it be the Americas broadcast that we do here on Sunday nights, whether it be the European Champ, well, actually, I don't mention it because I don't do those broadcasts. However, we mention it on the officials here on Apex, and that is the fact that usually you see the fastest lap times in the qualifying, then in the race they're a little bit slower. Here it's a little bit backwards because you have drivers saying fastest lap times in the race than they do in that qualifying session. This is a Brentez currently running P10, gets a move put on by Solorzano to move up into P9. Solorzano took the checkered flag, P10 in that first heat race, took the checkered flag in P10 in that sprint race, I should say. I shouldn't call them the heat races. I'm more used to the Apex Racing Academy F4 Championship broadcast here on Apex every Saturday, where we have a whole different series of terminology, 2 heat races, B main, A final, whatever you want to call it. It's a very hectic series of events. In that sprint race, it was Solorzano taking the checkered flag in P10, which is a good result for the AM driver, doubly so, considering he was a top running AM in that race. Still the top running AM right now, as we're seeing Salvador trying to get a move done here on Benlid to move up into that last podium position. The civil war between the two Canadians as they go into the hairpin of turn 7, a little bit of a slide as they exited that turn, but Timothy Salvatore pulls off that move quite nicely in the number 177 car to take P3. It's still not over yet, as we're seeing Benlid actually falling into the crutches of Howard right behind.
Yeah, and so
Ryland Richard has had a mistake from the. He was running up towards the front of the field, and he's now made a mistake and is dropping down to P6. Now dropping down to P7. Actually, no, nearly dropped down to P7 as Diego Zuccarelli was trying to get a move done on him, going through Collier. That was heading into turn 10, and he was running in a class of his own. You could see Franco Sanchez well farther up the road. I can't say there's just a little. Self-made mistake just over. He locked it up heading into Cunningham and just overshot his way into that corner. And sadly, for your at 1 point P2 runner, it ends in, well, it doesn't end in tears because he still has a decent amount of this race left to go. However, Ryland Richard is now massively on the back foot, now running in P6.
Well, I don't know about Ryland, but for me that would be ending in curse words as I'm trying to get my car reset. So yeah, simple mistake, just a little too hot going into the braking zone there at Cunningham. But no damage. He can get back out there. I did see where Hearn has already pitted, so he's going to try a little undercut since he's dropped back a little bit. So now he's going to be in some clean air. I'm sure he's probably taking this fast repair, and he's topped up on fuel. So we're going to see him running some hot laps to see how much time he can make up by himself. And as long as he doesn't get involved in any major battles with some of the traffic that was behind him previously, then he should make up quite a bit of time, I think. So that may be a good call on his part.
Overall, all these drivers still, there's different strategies that these drivers are going to try and implement, not just in reference to the pit stops we have coming up later on in this 45-minute race, now about 12 and a half minutes in, but just in terms of how you attack this race, when to push, when not to push, when to try and risk everything and go for a balls-to-the-wall, ballsy move. There's just so much that these drivers have on their plate when it comes to deciding how they race. We're following Inope as he gets a move done here, or tries to go for a move on McDougal to drop him down into P21 and move himself up into P20. Gets a move done, fairly commanding, fairly textbook stuff. As they go into turn number 1 there, these drivers, I can imagine many are quite frustrated. This is Brian Johnson in the number 50 car, and I was actually looking through the Radical Sim Racing Discord server right as we had a small little break there, and the reason why he may be driving a little bit erratically at times is actually his wheel isn't working, so he can't shift, so he's having to use his keyboard to actually shift gears. So I gotta give him credit where credit's due. The fact he's even attempting to race with a situation like that is truly unbelievable. That would be like me trying to commentate into a microphone across the room. Brian Johnson, the fact, I mean, he's running last. So, I mean, you can't really credit him too much. P23 is actually in the pits now, taking that early stop. I believe it has a little bit of damage on that Radical SR10 of his, might be the reason why he's in this pits. But the fact he's running this race with one hand on the wheel, the other one on a keyboard, is, I gotta admit, that is a quite bold feat. I gotta give him credit where credit's due.
So, Brian, I'm just gonna throw this out there. Put it in automatic transmission. It's not as fast as being able to shift yourself, but it's a hell of a lot faster than trying to hit your keyboard every time you need to shift gears.
Yeah, I think he's still trying to go for, I won't say all out glory, because as stated before, he's actually now 2 laps down, the only driver 2 laps down in this race. However, I think he's just being like, hey, look, I'm going to try and overcome this challenge, and I mean, I don't think we give out awards in this series. There's actually an award given out in the community after these races for the other driver of the day. I think even though Brian Johnson isn't the fastest, as oh my God, we have a massive moment here with Brendan Wright, and that's actually Krasik, who had another snap coming out of the hairpin, got into the grass as they went into turn 8, and my God, that nearly ended in absolute tears there for Charles Krasik and Brandon Wright. We may have to take a look at a replay, as I was talking about Brian Johnson possibly getting the driver of the day award. I think Charles Krasik may have to get the award for saves of the day. He had that one coming through Sunset Bend not very long ago, has another one that nearly ends in tears for both of those drivers. That was definitely contact between the two of them. I think I'm looking as hard as I can. There is, at least from my perspective, there's a little bit of damage on the front end of Wright's car, so I think it may be a little bit just cosmetic if that front splitter is at least tweaked a little bit. That may not be ideal for the full chat motorsports driver. This is how Krasik got all sorts of messed up, and oh my God, that was a big whack. I'm very surprised, in fact, that Krasik kept it going straight, because that was a significant whack and not a good section to hit the back of these cars. If he hit square on, that probably wouldn't have been as big of a deal as it was. However, hitting Krasik right at that left rear tire, the fact he didn't have he didn't go spinning like a top after that contact is quite honestly a miracle there for Krasik.
Yeah, the fact that neither one of them spun is quite a testament to the ability to hang on to that car. So yeah, he just got really loose off the curbs coming through the hairpin, and shot him to the right, and then he jumped up on the other curb and kind of kicked him back out into the track, and really got the car loose. But great job by Krasik, absorbing that impact. Everybody is able to continue on. I'm sure he's got a little bit of front end damage. He's probably got a little bit of aero damage that's probably going to slow him down on the straightaways, but he's still able to continue running. And I don't think he has been to the pits yet, so he will get the ability to come into the pits, get the fast repair, get the car straightened back up, and can continue on.
Diego Zuccarelli has now finally exited pit road after spending 53.5 seconds in the box. That is strange there for the Canadian. Do you have a theory? Let's hear Charles.
He's about 40 seconds slower than the other cars that have came into the pits for their pit stop. What that tells me is maybe he had a pit road entry speeding penalty.
Ooh, that could be it. That's that would not be ideal for the driver that hasn't had the best race in the world. Well, the best race meeting, I should say, so far tonight. Didn't have the best race in the world in that sprint race, and has not had a good turn of fortune here in this feature race. Franco Sanchez sets the fastest lap of the race, 1 minute 55.23, as Solorzano has a massive snap, battling with, I believe that's actually Siegel that he's battling with there. As they exited the final corner, Solorzano has a pretty big snap, still running the top of the AMs right now. And we're taking a look now. This is Diego Zuccarelli as he entered the pits, and we'll take a look at the speed. As I think... I think we'll try one more time to get that pit entry here. Unfortunately, my perspective was a little bit glitched out on there, and still is. So we'll see. I'll let the viewers be the judge. Was it a pit road speed penalty? Drum roll, please. Oh, our producer Josh is saying that he was actually involved in a crash there. So you saw it here on the stream here on Apex Racing TV. We did not, however, we will provide the sound effects. Bang! So that was what happened to Diego Zuccarelli. Really derails his race in that number 26 car, running currently inside the top 20, but only just 20th right now. That is not ideal for the Canadian driver. I think now, considering there is about a 20-second delay here on Apex Racing TV, I can now take a look at Zuccarelli, and I believe that was actually... that was the number 69 car of Ryland Richer that he made contact with as he had that forced entry into pit lane, had a lot of damage on the front end of that Radical SR10, and Richard was the other one that was the catalyst of that Shemazel. He's still running in P9 if I'm not mistaken, which is quite shocking there. So the Flying Eagle Motorsports driver in the number 69 car, not having the best race in the world for this feature, trying to go for a move, not going for a move actually, heading into that sunset bend. He was close enough, he had the run. However, these drivers may feel that, hey, there's no point of risking it about 20 minutes into this 45-minute race. I might as well back at it, take it a little bit easy for now, and maybe try and save up my tires for a later end of the race assault. But you can see now Richard tried to go for the move on Solorzano, heading into turn 1, just wasn't close enough to get the job done. I believe Odo has made some kind of mistake. He's actually towed back to the pits, unless there's some sort of connection issue from our end. No, he's actually in the pits. Ryan Odo, who I was going to mention not very long ago, the driver with the number P15, with the number 15 on his car, started this race in P15 and clawed his way up to 3rd. However, with an accident, he is now dropped out of the top 20. We'll take a tow back to pit lane. We may have to take a look at a replay to see what the heck happened to him. That was coming through, I think, going through 2 and 3. We'll take a look now of the replay of Odo to see what in the world happened to him. I believe it's unfortunately glitched out from my perspective, but just based off how he was on track, it was coming through it was actually coming out of Sunset Bend. I'm getting commentary from our producer Josh here. Thank you very much here, Josh, for the commentary. Still coming through Sunset. I think we may take a look. This was a little bit earlier while he was still savoring that P3 spot, running quite smooth, and that was a fantastic race that he was having for him. Just sadly for him, his attempt at a recovery ends in absolute tears. This is heading into 2 now. And I think it was a very bizarre situation here with Odo. We're having one more shot here at the replay. This is heading into 3. I believe who is that going a little bit farther wide? Oh no, is it? It's deja vu again. Brian Johnson and Ryan Odo making contact yet again. I'll be honest, folks, after that feature race, there were some heated discussions between those two drivers after that accident that happened at the before the halfway mark of that feature, and then they come to blows yet again. So that is bizarre. Well, that is strange. I think we'll take a look at another angle here, and this is strange between these two drivers.
Just lock up off the track, looking to he wanted to rejoin. Is just like he just can't get the grip in the grass. And just loop the car around, and unfortunately for Odo, there he was again. It just wrong place, wrong time, times 2. It's obviously Odo does not want to see Brian Johnson or Sebring for the remainder of his life.
I wouldn't really blame him, if I'm being honest. I believe Ryan Odo is still in this session, trying to hold out for as long as he can. This is Solorzano, who's just exited the pits. There's Ryan Odo's wrecked Radical SR10 without a front end to his car. You gotta feel so bad for the guy, because he had a fantastic run at Monza. If that accident didn't happen during that sprint race, he definitely would have taken a checkered flag there and would have been starting at the front of this race. But it's, oh man, there's going to be some very heated discussions there. As much as I give Brian Johnson credit for the fact that he tried to run this race in this SR10, I think there may be some discussions about whether or not he's really fit in this. He has a rookie iRacing license, which is not, well, it's bottom of the barrel, if we're being honest. So it's a shame. Very frail nerves, especially for Ryan Odo. I will not read out the YouTube chat. However, I will count out the exclamation points that he said in his messages. So let me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on the first one, and then extra, I think that's an extra 8, along with, I'm not sure what the small little toothpaste sort of symbol is at the end of that. But very, very upset drivers here. Here's another one that may be upset. Richie Hearn running in P13. He is currently trailing well, I wouldn't say wrecked, but certainly damaged race car of Pyra is currently running in P12, and Richie was starting at the front of the field. I believe he started this race in P4, now running well down the order in P12, trying to get the move done here to move into P11, gets a move done successfully, heading into Sunset Bend. However, he cannot be very happy about how his race has gone thus far. There's still a long ways left to go, 24 minutes into this 45-minute affair here, so we are over the halfway mark. So There's a lot to talk about, a lot to break down from this race already, and we just barely ticked over the halfway mark not very long ago. We still haven't even seen our leader pull into the pits yet.
Yeah, I will say this though, Hearn, yeah, obviously a little bit behind the eight ball there with the incident early in the race, but he's already taken his pit, he's already taken his fast repair. His lap times are top 4 from what he's been running, so all the cars are in front of him. He's actually making up ground though, because he's had a really just running in clear track by himself. There haven't been a lot of cars he's had to really deal with, so he's able to go out and run some really strong laps. So those other cars that are in front have to still pit. So, you know, he's not out of this yet. He could still end up with a really good result out of this race.
We're taking a look at the other incidents that cost Richie a little bit of time earlier on in this race. We had a lot of chaos all throughout that. I'll be honest, folks, I haven't even finished my glass of water, even though we're over an hour into this broadcast. It just shows you how hectic it's been in this race thus far. Right as I was mentioning the fact that this feature race here tonight, 45 minutes in length compared to the 15-minute long sprint, I was expecting it to be a little bit more tame, a little bit more calm with fewer incidents, but we have deja vu with that incident with Odo and Johnson, which is still being talked about in the in-race chat. Lots of drivers coming and going. Ryland Richard was one of them, was caught up in that schmozzle as Diego Zuccarelli actually got bumped into the pits. Now he is running in P15, so still not a good running position there for the Canadian. But Ryland Richards had a decent race in that, had a decent race at Monza. His performances there were quite impressive. Kind of came on towards the end of those as a little bit of a standout star in this meeting here at Sebring, though. He has been a force to be reckoned with. Sadly for him, though, hasn't been the best feature, if we're being honest. Now running in P10 after his pit stops. We're still waiting for the drivers in front of him to actually pull in. However, I doubt very highly his position will change too much. However, you gotta give him credit for still being out there on track, picking up that fast repair. I wonder how bad the damage was, because that was a significant contact between himself and Diego Zuccarelli in that pit road schmozzle, or pit road entry schmozzle, not very long ago. The fact he kept it on track with the damage he probably had from that contact is honestly quite impressive.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. You get damage on these cars that are very aero dependent, and you start losing time, and it just makes you want to get into the pits that much quicker. But it's a good job to him to just stay with his game plan, which is get to about the midway point and then take his pit stop and then get back out. So see if he can make up any more spots between now and the end of the race.
This is another replay. I believe this is of the Diego Zuccarelli incident, if I'm not mistaken. Sadly, my replay is glitched out once again. I'm seeing a glorified PowerPoint presentation from my perspective, but thankfully the people watching the stream here on Apex Racing TV are getting the correct view. So it's unfortunate there for Zuccarelli. Was looking to be a pretty good race meeting for him, but sadly things have just not gone his way. Max Siegel, who we haven't paid too much attention on in this race, now running in P8 as he gets overtaken by a few cars as he pulls into pit lane. Now in his pit box, you can see the blinking headlights on the front of that Radical SR10 of his. We haven't touched on really at all throughout this broadcast. Gets out of the pit box after 12.8 seconds stopped. This is Andy Vocal in P17. I believe he has taken his pit stop now, spent 50.8 seconds in the pits, which is much longer than most of the other drivers. You can see Siegel exiting the pits after 43.6 seconds down pit road. Looking through, I believe it was Ryland Richard spent the least amount of time in pit lane, so that's quite impressive from him. Tried to save a little bit more fuel with that damaged Radical SR10 of his. We'll see some of these drivers come into the pits farther up the road. I'm sure Sanchez will be eyeing pit road this time by. He has been command of this race pretty much from lights to flag, honestly. He has a 5.3 second gap between himself and Timothy Salvatore. We're following him as he goes into Sunset Bend, this time by on lap 15, about to start lap 16 here in just a couple of moments time. Will he pull into the pits? It looks like he's trying to late Apex hit here. Speaking of the late Apex, you can tune into that here on Apex Racing TV every Friday. He does come into pit lane now, so will Salvatore follow him, or will actually Salvatore does follow him? Will Howard follow those two as well? Or are we going to see a mass migration of a driver from Peru and a bunch of ones from Canada coming in. No, we are actually not seeing that. I believe Harris has stayed out on track and will assume the lead of this race. I'm probably going to imagine he'll come into the pit lane next time by. Sanchez is in his box, Salvatore's in his box, and we're going to see Howard and Ben Lid pull in as well. Who is going to have the quickest stop? Sanchez is already out and is about to exit the pit lane. He's now off that bund. He's now on full tilt on those new, well, not new tires. He doesn't take tires. He takes a little bit of fuel, so a little bit of a heavier SR10 than he's been used to so far in this race. Matthew Howard exiting at MP4. Jacqueline is coming on the left-hand side. I believe he will not be able to overtake him. As it stands at the moment, Harris is at the front, 19.2 seconds ahead, although he has not taken that stop. Salvatore actually had a 2 seconds slower time down pit road than Sanchez did, so not sure if he had to take a little bit more fuel. This is Max Siegel. Oh no, he's going for a spin coming through turn one. Keep it out of the barrier, keep it out of the barrier. He does. Nice. Oh my god, that's a beautiful save there. Nicely played. I agree there, Charles. That was a hair-raising moment for Siegel, but he keeps it out of the barrier.
He did, yeah. There was a car coming out of the pits, and I believe it was a Brontes. I think it was. I'm not really sure. It was one of those 2 or 3 cars coming out of the pits, and I think, spooked him a little bit. I think he tried to just add a little more steer into that corner and just a little too much, and lost the rear end off in the grass, but was able to catch it before it got into the barrier, and lost a little bit of time, but can continue on. That does actually put Hearn, now that the pit stop cycle is almost over, up to P8, and he's only a couple of seconds behind Abrantes in P7.
That's looking pretty good there. A nice recovery drive if he holds on to it. This is Eric Harmon, who's involved in a Shamazo in the early stages of this race, making his way up to P14 after a fairly textbook move there. But no, he actually gets wide coming through the hairpin and loses that spot there to Krasik, now dropping down to P15. Harris is now down pit road, so he'll be losing out on the lead as we see the battle with Krasik, who actually just let him by there. Oh, what in the hell happened there between those two? A nice little game of leapfrog as they enter turn 10. Not sure what happened there with Eric Harmon, who he gained that position, then lost that position, then gained that position, then lost that position. That was a bizarre series of events that we'll take a look at a replay of here. This is Harmon riding on board with him, heading into the hairpin. Clips of grass actually there, going down. That's actually going through Big Bend of turn 6. Clips of grass on exit. Tried to get the move done on Krasik, ran a little bit wide and was very slow on exit. Lost out on that spot. Then Krasik got him back. Then Krasik tried to let him by, heading into turn 10, and then it looked like it was just a big overshoot there from Harmon as they went into the braking zone. So that was a nice little game of leapfrog there. That was strange to see. I've never seen that before on a broadcast. Sanchez now leads. Harris has come back out of the pits in P5, so he's running in a race of his own. He has Ben Lead and Howard right in front of him. Those two lock stern, about a half a second separating those two. But then between Harris and Richard, Ryland Richard in P6, that's a pretty expansive gap between those two, about 8 seconds. So I think Harris may risk it to try and grab the biscuit and move into the podium spots. This is a good storyline and a good battle between these. Well, it's currently 2 cars that are close to each other, but I'm sure it will turn into 3 between now and the 45-minute mark, which is coming out in about 12 minutes time.
Yeah, I was just looking over at timing and scoring about with Harmon. Pretty high rated driver, 5.5K. A license maxed out, so safety rating really good. I'm just going to guess that this is just a new car to him. It's just it looks like his issues are maybe with braking. And if you're one of those guys that's just a really good GT driver and you're used to just powering onto those analog brakes, when you first get into a car that doesn't have them, like the Radical or Porsche Cup or pick your poison, SRF, Formula Ford. There's a little bit of a learning curve that you got to adjust to. That you got to learn how to brake a little differently with these cars where they're with a tendency to lock up. And it may just be that he has to do a little bit of adjustments on his setup, maybe move the brake bias back to the rear a bit to try and keep a little bit of the wear off the fronts and prevent those lockups. And it may be that he's just got to, do a little more work and get a little more a little better with the braking on these cars, and then next thing you know, he may be up there challenging for race wins.
Actually, Harmon is somewhat of a veteran here in these radicals. However, you mentioned a great point there, Charles. The brakes are so finicky in this car. Fixed setups for these league races for this series, so these drivers don't have any sort of way to kind of negotiate that. I probably should have told you that at the start of this. Well, before the start broadcast, I apologize.
We'll call that rookie mistake on my part. No harm, no foul. So obviously he knows what he's doing, and just maybe not coming to terms with a fixed setup. And this fixed setup races, you really have to put a little bit of time and effort into them to just really kind of learn how they got the car set up. And so once again, if you can't adjust to brake bias, that's definitely something you've got to adjust to instead of adjusting it out.
I think these drivers probably have about 2 or 3% when it comes to adjusting the brake balance. That's the only thing they can change really in these Radical SR10s. It creates a nice little challenge, especially in the official races when they have a lot of different tire wear, a lot of different stuff going on in those races. Trying to change that brake bias throughout the track, throughout a lap, and throughout those races, it's a big part. It's another, it goes back to the term strategy that we mentioned, whether it be with the pit stops that we have in this series, or whether it be trying to find when to attack and when not to attack in these races, as my voice is giving out here for a second, taking a quick little break to catch my breath. The strategy plays a big role, and it's a multifaceted kind of way to attack different strategies for these Radical races, whether it be the officials or whether it be these races here on Sundays, which are a bit more bit longer and a bit shorter as well. The official races tend to run about half an hour, maybe 25 minutes at their shortest. Here, the 15-minute sprint race, as we see Marias getting a move done, heading into turn number 5, and then you have this feature race, which is much longer than these drivers usually get out of the officials. It's a complete change of it's a complete change of dichotomy to break out the thesaurus, if I can spit my words out here. Ooh, that's a big moment there for Ryland Richard, who nearly just made contact with Louis Pires heading into the hairpin, I believe. I'll take a look. That was Ryland Richard. Actually, lapped cars playing a role in this race, so that was a small little bit of a schmozzle between those two as they went into the hairpin. That was incredibly close to contact. Ryland Richard having to slam on those brakes, lock him up a little bit. He will be happy that he did damage his race car with that near contact between those two. However, his front tires are not going to be happy because of that severity of the lockup heading into the hairpin. They're probably rectangles now.
Yeah, it's for sure that's not helpful with those tires, and obviously don't have quite the feedback to just feel a tire when it's flat spotted, but you definitely can tell it by the performance of it. So it's definitely something that you have to be very conscious of, and the more you lock up, the more you will lock up, and that's just kind of the nature of it.
Yeah, I think the saying is that tire will always find that previous lockup spot and say, like, hey, I was comfortable here, so I'll bring it back here as well. We're in the dying stages of this race right now, 37 minutes and 45 seconds on the board, about to hit the 38-minute barrier here. So in just a few moments' time, we are going to have 7 minutes left to go here, and it looks like it's going to be fairly textbook stuff from Sanchez, whose gaps has actually decreased a little bit now, so that gap is about 5 seconds. However, I say that, I think Franco Sanchez at this stage is taking it a little bit easy, not having to push too hard. The gap is now teetering around 5 seconds here, so Franco Sanchez maybe backing up a little bit just to give us a small little storyline to follow in the last 7 minutes of this race. Who knows? He has a clean road in front of him right now. You can see the track map, and the next car to him is all the way on that Ullman straightaway towards the end of this lap. So Franco Sanchez has, I'm trying to do the maths in my head, that would be about 1.5 miles, I would have to say, of empty racetrack in front of him. He doesn't have too much to worry about between now and the checkered flag of this race, which is coming out in, I think, 4 or 5 laps time. It depends on when they cross the line and how the time works out. But Franco Sanchez, a name that we recognize from the official broadcast, a name that we see in, I believe he actually races in the European Series as well as the America Series that we're covering here tonight. He is a force to be reckoned with in the Radicals, and proving that right now. The number 88 car has been up at the front pretty much every single lap, I believe, because of his adversaries pitting at the lap and not actually finishing that lap in the lead. He has led every single lap of this race, which is quite impressive for the driver out of Peru.
Yeah, he's having a great run, obviously. I was just kind of looking at timing and scoring again. I want to kind of stay on this if we can. I want to hear if he's lifting and coasting, because his pit stop time was a little bit shorter than most of the top front runners. Maybe he short pitted a little bit, and maybe that's why his lap time's off a bit, is he's maybe doing a little bit of fuel saving to make sure he gets it home.
Didn't hear any lifting heading into turn 3. However, this is one of the heaviest braking zones on the lap. I will shut my mouth, which is usually hard for me to do. And no, I think he's attacking the braking zones.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good.
I think maybe what he might be doing is just taking it easy at this stage. You can see, 11.4 seconds in the pits. So that was an incredibly fast stop there from Franco Sanchez. What it must have been is he had a very commanding lead in the first half of this race, so maybe he just had the ability to save up so much fuel that he was able to short fill in that stop. So that might be the reason why he's well, not really attacking. Well, he's attacking the braking zones as you'd usually expect here in these Radical SR10s, and that gap has actually increased yet again, so about 5.7 seconds separating those two drivers. Is Charles Krasik getting real racy with the back. I believe that's Vocal that he nearly made contact with coming through the first turn. We saw drivers attempting a bump and run at the very start of that sprint race earlier on this evening, and we're seeing it again in the final 5 minutes of this feature race here. Now 4 minutes left to go on that clock, so not a whole lot of time left to go. Andy Vocal currently running in P15. A decent race for him. He hasn't really gained any positions, but at the same time, he hasn't lost positions as well. That's Harmon moving up a spot on Tritanopoulos. Well, I was really worried about that pronunciation. I think I got it right there.
That's
the Canadian drops down to P14 after getting an overtake put on him by Harmon, who's trying to recover. He's the, oh boy, that's a big lock up there from McDougall right in front of Vocal, who might have spooked himself a little bit there as he's now fallen into the crutches here of Krasik. These two separated by barely any air as Richard McDougall rejoins the track after that big lockup. Already has the front end missing off of that SR10, so I'm not sure. He must have had some sort of incident that we didn't catch on our camera, now running in P21, the last of the cars still in this race. Surprisingly so, considering the drama that we've had. Ooh, as we see Vocal actually went off the track, ran wide, I believe, coming through turn 15 and beached himself on that curb and lost out on that spot to Krasik as they went through the turn 15 section this time by. We're taking a look at a very quick replay. Thank you very much, Josh, for the quick replay. This is Krasik right behind him. I don't think there's any contact between the two of them. I think that was just Vocal outbreaking himself, had a little bit of a lockup heading into that turn. I think that's the reason why Charles Krasik moves into that spot.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Just kind of just outbreak, too much speed, and made it nice and easy for Krasik to get by. I will say this: we'll kind of go back to our two rookies in the field, McDougall and Johnson. It's pretty gutsy to pick this as the first series you want to go out and run. This is these cars are anytime you get a car that doesn't really have analog brakes, it's a little more difficult to drive, and it's a little bit of a learning curve that not a lot of rookies would be really experienced enough to do. So hats off to McDougall and Johnson as well. And I'm going to go back, since we talked about the fact that this is a fixed series. There's probably a restriction on assistance in the sim, so that may be why he couldn't switch it to an automatic transmission. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt there. So he's just trying to do what he could do as far as his gear shifting was concerned. He just might not have had the ability to get that the little bit of help to switch it off to automatic because it's fixed. So like I said, give him the benefit of the doubt there.
So this is quite interesting as we are now on the last lap of the race, a battle between Benlid and Richard. Ryland Richard has an up and down race. Meanwhile, Benlid, who gets a move done to move back into the top 5, has dropped back like a rock as of late. He was involved in that 3-car fight between himself, Howard, and Harris right up there towards the front. However, that battle that we were thinking was going to be a nice one to follow between now and the checkered flag has all but diminished, as now it's a fight between Ryland Richard and Ben Lid. We'll see, will Ryland Richard go for the move heading into the hairpin? He's got the outside line now, trying to outbrake him heading into the turn. I think he won't be able to get the job done there as they go through the hairpin. Meanwhile, I believe Siegel had some kind of connection issue, still running P12. I was going to say that he crashed, but no, he's running in P12 right now as Ryland Richard trying to go, it looked like he was going to go for the outside, goes for the switchback and the cut to the inside line, and he's hitting the curb, actually hitting Benlid there. A little bit of contact between the two of them, entering the corner, midway through the corner and exiting it as well. Ryland Richard now trying to find any sort of way, going around the outside of Tower. I don't think so. Boy, that is not a good move to try and go. That's a tricky corner, going single file, let alone side by side. So I think try and go around the outside into that turn. That is very, very bold. Ryland Richard still trying to go for the move into turn 15. Not close enough. Franco Sanchez, meanwhile, up towards the front, a 9.4 second gap he has between himself and Timothy Salvatore, is going to take the checkered flag to go for the clean sweep here from the Radical Americas Championship at Sebring. And it's going to be a massive gap between himself and Timothy Salvatore, who's dropped back like a rock, and I believe he's lost about 2 seconds in the span of pretty much no time whatsoever. So I think he may have been running out of fuel. Thankfully for his sake, he still finishes this race in P2. Ryland Richard is going to be a drag race to the line between himself and Benlid, and it's going to be side by side across the line. Benlid holds off to finish this race in P number 5, less than a tenth of a second. It was about 300ths of a second separating those two drivers as they came to the line. 45 minutes, over 45 minutes of racing action, and it ends with just a few feet separating some of these drivers. So it's Sanchez taking the win, as I said, Salvatore in P2, Howard rounding out your podium. This is Solorzano, who I believe will be taking the win in the M category. Sadly, it was marking him as a pro driver there, so he will be taking the win. He'll be taking the double of the AM races. He'll be taking both wins in that category tonight, as will Franco Sanchez with the pros, as we see a little bit of a parking lot forming here in the runoff area of turn 1. A somewhat dramatic race with drivers having very nerves running on the very ragged edge, even though they haven't even hit the halfway mark of that first sprint race here this evening. A chaotic series of events. I think, Charles, from your perspective, you were mentioning how some of the rookies were very bold to run this race in these cars as really their first sort of trial by fire from the series. I think for your sake, being dunked into the deep end here of this series as your debut here for the Radical SR10s, talk about trial by fire. I think for your sake, it may have been trial by firing squad.
Maybe so. No, it wasn't. No, it's a good race. Obviously, there's some really talented drivers. I think Odo being taken out in both races kind of, I think he was going to be battling with Sanchez during the course of that race. Just unfortunate. And it's just it's a shame, because I think that would have been a good battle up front toward the end of the race. But great job by a lot of the drivers. Hearn, good job coming back up to get P7. Richard battling back up from early trouble to get to P6. And so, yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be a very exciting series, and it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next round.
Well, I think we're going to put the cap here on this round and go through the finishing order from this race. A dramatic race meeting here and a dramatic feature race, and it's going to be the man that took the win in the sprint taking the win in the feature as well. Franco Sanchez, 11.8 seconds ended up separating himself and Timothy Salvatore at the end of that race, and that's going to be Matthew Howard rounding out your podium there. A nice recovery drive after he was involved in that fight and was actually running in P4 behind Benlid not very long ago, so he rounds out the podium in third. Mark Harris finishes this race in fourth. John Benlid, after having some sort of schmozzle that dropped him back into the crutches of Ryland Richard, he finishes this race in P5. Richard there in P6, just barely any air separating the two of them at the finish. Richie Hearn, who had an up and down feature race, he finishes this race in P7. Bruno Abrantes in P number 8. Manuel Solorzano takes both wins in the AM category here tonight. He finishes this race in P9. Diego Zuccarelli, after a unfortunate series of events where Ryland Richard himself came to blows, sending him down pit road. He finishes this race in P10, a pretty good recovery drive there from him to round out your top 10. That's Max Siegel in P11, Eric Harmon in 12th with another up and down race. Triantopoulos, again, the name that I hope I got right, in P13. Andy Vogel in 14th, involved in that fight with himself and John Krasik. Those two round out your top 15. That's Andres Anope rounding out the top 16. Lots of drivers getting called out by this very dramatic race. That showed Joel Jacklin in P17 and Ryan Odo involved in that unfortunate incident, which is still being discussed in the in-racing chat in iRacing. He finishes this race in a disappointing P18 after he could have and probably should have taken the checkered flag in both races here tonight. That's Matthias Marias in P19, Luis Perez. I probably killed that pronunciation. I'm not sure if it's Piers or Pires. Hopefully I got it right. Regardless, he is in P20, and that's going to be Richard McDougall 4 laps down, while the last drivers to actually take the checkered flag. That's Brendan Wright and Brian Johnson, the drivers that dropped out very, very early on in P22 and P23. And Charles, I said it was must have been quite an experience from your perspective. Joining this series, I believe this is the first Radical SR10 broadcast you've ever done, only having recently bought this car. So just what do you think of the racing that we saw here tonight?
Well, I mean, it's obviously I've got a little bit of experience with the Radicals driving the SR8, and I've raced in some leagues with it. Obviously, this is just an upgraded version of the car, but obviously you can see lots of downforce, lots of speed, lots of drafting. Once again, it's a really nice community to be a part of. So looking forward to the next events when I can come in and call them. So we'll see when that is. Obviously the schedule is it's a little difficult for me. I've already got a couple of commitments during the day, along with a race team that I have to try and manage. So it was a fun race. Like I said, I think that some of the incidents we had during the race kind of maybe tamp down the finishing results and the battles we could have had up near the front. But I think there's a really good group of drivers in here, and I think there's going to be some exciting racing still to come in the league.
Well, I think we're going to have a chat with some of them here. I can see them waiting in the interview waiting area. We'll drag them by the collar and bring them in here. I think the first driver that we're going to have a chat with is your P2 finisher from tonight's race, and that is Tim Salvatore. We'll bring him in here. Hopefully he's not having a chat with his fellow competitor, Matt Howard. Tim Salvatore, thank you so much for joining us here in the commentary booth. How was it out there, bud?
I mean, I think it was relatively tame for me. I mean, I kind of spent a lot of both the pre-final there and the final by myself, out of kind of very lucky circumstances. So I think a lot of my result comes down to luck. Wasn't exactly the fastest out there, but I guess I kept it on track and kept my nose clean. So it was a really nice result.
Still put together a pretty good drive there and grabbed that P2 result. We were seeing towards the end of that the gap went from about 9 seconds down to actually about 11 and a half by the time you took the checkered flag. So were you running out of fuel towards the end of that feature race?
No, I thought I had the gap down to about 4.9 seconds there, and I thought, well, maybe the leader's got an issue or something. And then he turned it back up, and I saw his lap times kind of stabilize. I had plenty of fuel to finish. I could have done 3 more laps. I purely just went into, okay, I've got my teammate behind me 6 seconds back, and I've got the leader 5 seconds ahead. There's 3 laps left. There's 0% chance of me being able to catch them. Let's stay away from the curbs. Let's not push any braking zones. Just get the car to the finish, and we don't need to do any hot lap competitions at the end of the race if it's not necessary.
So pretty much towards the end of that race, you're running safe, so to speak?
Yeah, I was on pure cruise control at the end of the race there. Like I said, just nice and lucky, and I was able to be kind of on a piece of track by myself. So it was really fortunate circumstances for me there to be able to do that.
Now, one thing as well with tonight's racing action, we had a tale of two halves, you could say. We had that 15-minute long sprint race, which was very hectic from our perspective here in the commentary booth. In the feature race, where we had that pit stop to negotiate with, can you just talk the viewers through the mindset of having a much shorter race followed immediately by a much longer one where you have to have a completely different strategy heading into it?
Yeah, I mean, I really like it. I love the sprint aspect of it and the endurance aspect of it. It really kind of allows everyone to show their skills across a wide spectrum. Definitely in the sprint race, it was full push the entire time. It was make a move whenever you thought you could, and then as well, if somebody was kind of cruising up onto the back of you, you just had to keep pushing harder and see if you could really get the lap time out of it. Whereas in the final there was an aspect of fuel save, tire saving, not sticking your nose in every place it should be, and kind of just easing off and taking at least, especially those first few laps, taking it easy and just kind of trying to get to the finish of the race.
And we saw at the start, especially of that sprint race, there's a lot of chaos heading into that hairpin of turn 7. I'll ask you this, just from your perspective as just driving around the track, and maybe even a perspective of being involved in a battle, what's the hardest corner on this track?
I have to say, I think Tower's the hardest corner on this track. The first lap, though, for sure, that hairpin is an absolute, it's a killer. And these cars take a few laps to get warmed up. You're pushing hard, and a lot of understeer in the first couple laps until you get the tire temperature up. And of course, the first couple laps is as well as where it's easiest to gain spots. So it's super easy to push it a little bit too far and go beyond your own limit there. Thankfully, I was able to navigate my way through that. I think I gave myself a good amount of extra space on braking going into that corner. And it paid off by being able to avoid some carnage in both races there.
And I think looking ahead on this Radical America's schedule, next time out on April the 7th, it's going to be at Watkins Glen. So how do you fancy your chances heading into that track in a few weeks' time?
I mean, I don't think I actually have the pace to actually win any of these races. Hopefully I can get a really good result. I do love Watkins Glen. I think it's one of the best tracks in the world. It's just such a great racing track, such good history there. The cars, just the Radical loves it there, and the racing that it creates is spectacular as well. So I'm really looking forward to that race. Whatever happens on track happens, but I know it's just going to be a lot of fun.
Well, thank you for joining us here in the commentary booth, Tim. It was nice to get your insight after that race here at Sebring. The last question before we let you go, is there anyone that you'd like to thank or shout out?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to thank you guys for putting this on. I'd like to thank Radical for the series and everything that Diego and Sandro do. It's really great for the community to be able to do this. Also like to thank teammates at Race Sim Canada for, we're always on every night racing together, and we had a really good team result today for myself and Matt in second and third, and then our sister team there, Mark, in fourth place. So it was a really great team result. Thank you guys. Have a good night.
And thank you for joining us here in the commentary booth. I think we'll bring in your teammate here to have a chat as well. Congratulations on the P2, and fingers crossed that we see you next time out at the Glen.
Have a good night, guys.
And that was Tim Salvatore having some quick words with us. And Charles, would you like to have a chat with his teammate Matt Howard?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's bring Matt Howard in here with the final step on the podium, P3. Matt, congratulations on that P3. So, I was sitting here looking at your timing and scoring. Pretty quiet. We didn't really call your name out very much, but you moved up 6 spots to get on the podium. So just talk about how you progressed through the field.
Well, honestly, I actually got a much better start than I had anticipated. And when I came out of turn 1, I was like, well, the air's pretty thin up here, I wasn't expecting to be that high up. And just kind of kept my nose clean through the first couple of laps and tried to endure the tire warm-up phase. And some others faltered, and I just happened to just be there and stay there.
Yeah, absolutely. So talk about. So let's talk. I'm a novice to the car. Obviously, I've driven Sebring and various other cars. So just talk about how the car reacts to the bumps and curbs here at Sebring.
You definitely have to be careful over the bumps, especially with throttle application. It definitely has a habit of lighting the rear tires, especially out of some corners like the hairpin and sunset. If you catch that bump wrong, you can do a 180 pretty quickly. So it's definitely some half throttle, and steering wheel straight is definitely your best friend.
There you go. So is there anybody you want to shout out or give thanks to tonight?
Just gonna go reiterate what Tim said there. It's a big shout out to my team, Tim, Curtis, who isn't actually in this event, and Mark as well. Like Tim said, we practice all the time and we race together. Also want to thank my wife for allowing me the time to come on the sim and do what I love.
Oh, absolutely. So congratulations, Matt, and we'll look to see you in the next race at Watkins.
Thank you very much, guys. Have a good night.
That was Matt Howard, the driver that ran at the podium from this race. And Charles, we kind of asked the other drivers there what their thoughts are heading into Watkins Glen. Unfortunately, I don't believe, well, we're not too sure who is going to be alongside me in the commentary booth next time at the Glen, but just what are your thoughts heading into that race, if you are a part of this broadcast or not?
Yeah, well, I will say this. If I can make it, I'll absolutely be here. This is like a fantastic event. I will reiterate what Tim said. It is one of the best racetracks in the world. Watkins, I absolutely love it. I love racing it. I love doing commentary. It'll be interesting to see what the choice of the track layout is going to be. So that obviously will play a factor in how these cars are going to perform there. Where we've got the bus stop or we don't have the bus stop, but just a fantastic track. And this is one of those tracks that's just kind of made for single makes more than anything else, even though the multi-class racing is fantastic there as well. But when you get a good single make race there, it's amazing to watch.
Yeah, that track is absolutely amazing. We've seen fantastic radical races from Watkins Glen in the past. The slipstreaming is a big role in that, but you also have those killer curbs that could catch out some of these drivers. I think before we wrap up this broadcast, I see Ryan Oda waiting in our interview waiting area. I believe he actually has his mic mute. However, I was just going to message my producer Josh saying that after the night he had, I don't think it may be the best idea in the world, as my voice cracks for the first time on this broadcast. It may not be the best idea to interview him, because I'm sure he is looking more for a sip of alcohol than to chat after an unfortunate night for him. But I think we'll focus on the racing that we had here. Interesting to say the very least. As I said, Charles, I think it may be a trial by fire from your perspective, but just talk us through what kind of expectations you had entering this broadcast and what your just thoughts are after it.
I mean, anytime you go to an Apex Racing event to do a broadcast, they're always really well run. The people behind the scenes with that series always do a fantastic job. They've got all their ducks in a row, so to speak. And then the drivers on track always put in a good performance, and that's what we saw again tonight. So there's no surprises there. Just happy to be part of it. Glad I could come in and lend my small amount of wit and wisdom to this event. I'm not sure, not having all the rules hammered out is probably a detriment more than it is a boost. But that being said, it was a great event. I always love coming in and doing broadcasts. So yeah, like I said, if there's a couple if I don't make it to Watkins, there are a couple that piqued my interest when you went through it. Obviously, my home track is Barber. I've actually seen Radicals racing at Barber in real life. It is amazing racing to watch. I may have to pencil that in my schedule and come back and jump in for that just because it's my home track and I love it. It is, and for single make racing, it doesn't compare. There's no comparison with anybody else. It's just a fantastic track, tight, twisty, some good places to get good passing zones. But obviously Watkins is one of the best in the world. But my heart's always at Barber, even when I'm not there. So, I probably won't be the last you'll see me here on the Radical series.
Well, I think, Charles, we have worked quite a long ways here on Apex before we did the Ray esports season. That will hopefully be coming back on Tuesdays. Well, we'll be coming back here on Tuesdays in a few weeks' time, and hopefully we're back on that because it was a pleasure and a wonderful series to cover all season long this past season of iRacing. And here with the Radicals, I can definitely understand why you're looking forward to Barber. We had that in Season 2 of 2023, and even though I did that broadcast all by myself, which was like the 5th broadcast I ever did on Apex Racing TV, I still really enjoyed it, even though Apex Racing TV's own Sam Fitzpatrick really pulled away with that. You can hear him on the European Championship broadcast here from these league races, and you can tune into the next one on April 7th here on Apex Racing TV. Same time, same place. Hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. You know what to do if you've used YouTube for about 5 minutes if you want to stay up to date of everything going on here on Apex Racing TV. But as for tonight, I think that just about does it. So for myself, Ron Mons, Charles Bichelle, joining me in the commentary booth, and Josh Wilkie working on all the cameras and doing a fantastic job in the virtual production hauler, I say thank you all so very much for watching. Have a great rest of your night, and we'll see you all again on April 7th when the series returns to Watkins Glen.
Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.